The courtroom buzzed that Tuesday morning, filled with the hum of whispers and the weight of anticipation. From across the aisle, I could practically feel Karen Whitfield's smug confidence radiating like cheap perfume. She sat there in her signature power suit, lips pursed into that self-satisfied smirk I'd come to know too well, whispering to her lawyer as if the verdict had already been written in her favor. The ever-righteous HOA president, ready to put the stubborn ranch owner in his place. At least that's what she thought, until Judge Morrison called the court to order and asked if I had legal representation. I rose slowly, adjusting my tie with deliberate calm. "Your Honor," I said evenly, "I'll be representing myself." Karen's lawyer, a young, overconfident fellow named Bradley Cooper, actually let out a small smirk as if he'd just won the lottery. Poor kid. He had no idea the storm he'd just walked into. "Very well," Judge Morrison said, arching a brow. "Please state your qualifications for the record." I cleared my throat. Thomas Mitchell, retired attorney. 35 years with Mitchell and Associates, specialized in property law and civil litigation. Member of the state bar since 1987. The smirk slid right off Cooper's face. Karen's jaw dropped open before she quickly snapped it shut. Life out on Cedar Ridge Ranch was supposed to be peaceful, after decades of courtroom brawls and corporate showdowns. I'd bought that 100-acre spread precisely for its solitude. No neighbors for miles. No HOA nonsense, just me, my horses, and the occasional weekend visit from my grandkids. The ranch had been in the Henderson family for 3 generations before I purchased it. And old Jim Henderson had been crystal clear when we signed the papers. This land had never been part of any homeowners association. The nearest subdivision, Willowbrook Estates, sat 2 miles away, separated by county land and my property line. For the first year, everything was perfect. Quiet mornings, open skies, and no one telling me what color to paint my barn. Then Karen Whitfield got herself elected HOA president. Our first run-in happened on a crisp October morning. I was out repairing a section of fence when a white Lexus SUV rolled up to my gate. Out stepped a woman in her 50s, hair perfectly highlighted and styled, clipboard in hand, the picture of suburban authority. "Excuse me," she called out in that clipped tone of someone who expects the world to stop when she speaks. "I need to talk to you about community trail access." I set down my hammer and walked over, keeping the gate between us. "Can I help you?" "I'm Karen Whitfield," she declared, "president of the Willowbrook Estates, HOA." She said it like it was supposed to impress me. "We're implementing a new community trail system, and we need to establish an easement through your property to connect to the county hiking paths." I almost laughed. "Ma'am, this is private property. It's not part of your HOA." Her smile tightened. "Well, that's what we need to discuss. The community believes that interconnected trails would benefit everyone, increase property values, and promote healthy living." "That's great for your community," I said evenly. "But this ranch isn't part of Willowbrook Estates. Never has been." She tapped her clipboard with a manicured nail. "Mr. Mitchell, I don't think you understand how these things work. When a community decides something is for the greater good, individual holdouts can't just block progress." That's when I knew she was going to be a problem. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I understand perfectly. The answer is no. Have a nice day." I turned back to my fence as she huffed climbed into her Lexus, and slammed the door hard enough to make the gravel jump. Over the next 6 months, Karen's crusade escalated from annoying to illegal. First came the letters printed on official HOA letterhead demanding I attend board meetings I had zero obligation to attend. Then came the county complaints about code violations that didn't exist, forcing me to waste entire afternoons with inspectors who always left shaking their heads at her foolishness. She even organized community walks where groups of residents gathered at my property line to gawk point and take photos like I was some exhibit at the zoo. The breaking point came in April. I arrived at my back gate to find the padlock cut clean through and tire tracks snaking deep into my property. Someone had hammered bright orange trail markers into my trees along the private road. I spent the afternoon tearing them out and installing new security cameras. The footage that night told me everything I needed to know. At 2 o'clock in the morning, there was Karen Whitfield herself, wearing a tracksuit, bolt cutters in hand, marching up to my gate with 2 other HOA board members. They cut my new lock, drove right in, and started planting trail markers like they owned the place. The next morning, I hired a welding crew to install a solid steel gate reinforced with concrete posts. Then, I had my attorney send Karen and her entire board a formal cease and desist letter. That's when she made her biggest mistake yet. She decided to sue me. The lawsuit arrived on a Friday afternoon, hand-delivered by a process server who looked more apologetic than professional. Karen Whitfield and the Willowbrook Estates HOA were suing me for malicious obstruction of community resources, interference with established easements, and my personal favorite, creating a public nuisance. They wanted me to remove all barriers to access immediately, pay $50,000 in damages, and cover their legal fees. I read the complaint twice, debating whether to laugh or pour a stiff drink. Her lawyer had thrown every argument imaginable at the wall, hoping one might stick. Claims of historical use, implied easements, even the suggestion that my ranch had once been part of a larger parcel that included community access. All total nonsense. But it would need a proper response. So, I decided to dust off my bar license. No sense paying another attorney for a fight I could win in my sleep. I filed my answer to the complaint, denying every charge, and countered with my own claims for trespassing, harassment, and defamation. Then, I settled in for what I knew would be an entertaining day in court. Karen Whitfield had no idea she'd just picked a legal fight with someone who spent 35 years eating lawyers like hers for breakfast. That's how we ended up here on that crowded Tuesday morning. Karen strutted into court, flanked by her entourage, her attorney, 2 HOA board members, and someone scribbling furiously for the neighborhood newsletter. She even wore her little HOA president lapel pin, as if it carried legal authority. Judge Morrison, a nonsense woman in her 60s, whom I'd appeared before countless times in my career, took her seat, and I couldn't help but smile. She didn't recognize me right away. 5 years had passed since my retirement, but when I stated my credentials, I saw the flicker of realization cross Judge Morrison's face. "Mr. Mitchell," she said with a faint nod, "welcome back to my courtroom." Karen's lawyer, young Bradley Cooper, jumped to his feet for the opening statement. The kid had enthusiasm, I'll give him that, but his words were all show and no foundation. He waved his hands dramatically, pacing like he was auditioning for a courtroom drama, spinning a tale of an antisocial recluse, me, selfishly blocking innocent families from enjoying nature. According to him, the trails had existed for decades. My property was holding the entire community hostage, and Karen Whitfield was a selfless leader just trying to serve the people. When my turn came, I didn't bother with theatrics. I spoke plainly. Your Honor, I have here the original deed to my property from 1952, the official survey from my purchase in 2021, and sworn affidavit from the previous 3 owners covering more than 60 years of ownership. At no time has any easement ever existed on this land. At no time has it been part of any HOA, and at no time has there been public access of any kind. I placed each document carefully on the table, one by one, as Cooper's confident smile faltered. Furthermore, I continued, pulling out a manila folder, I have security footage showing Miss Whitfield personally trespassing on my property on no fewer than 6 separate occasions, cutting locks, driving past my gates, and installing unauthorized trail markers. I handed the judge several printed stills. I also have 17 harassing letters sent by Miss Whitfield, records of 9 false complaints to various county departments, and documentation of a coordinated smear campaign to damage my reputation within the community. Judge Morrison's eyebrows rose as she looked through the photos. Miss Whitfield, she said, holding up one of the stills, is this you in these photographs? Karen's face turned from smug to pink to an alarming shade of purple. That's taken out of context, she sputtered. The community needed those trails. So, you admit to trespassing on Mr. Mitchell's property, the judge pressed. Karen's lawyer sprang to his feet. Your Honor, my client acted in good faith under the belief that easements already existed. I almost felt sorry for the man. Almost, Your Honor, I said. I'd like to submit Defense Exhibit C. I held up a flash drive. This contains an audio recording of a phone conversation between Miss Whitfield and another HOA board member. In her own words, and I quote, I don't care if he owns it. I'll make his life hell until he gives in. The courtroom went dead silent. The only sound was Karen's sharp gasp. That was a private conversation, she shrieked. Recorded from my property, I replied calmly. Your voice carried over my fence during one of your organized gatherings. Single-party consent state, Your Honor. Completely legal. Cooper tried to recover, mumbling about community benefit and the greater good, but the damage was done. Judge Morrison had heard enough. Counselor, she said sharply, does your client have any evidence of an easement? Any document whatsoever proving these claims? Cooper's papers fluttered as he searched desperately. We're still reviewing historical records, Your Honor. So that's a no, Judge Morrison said flatly. She turned to me. Mr. Mitchell, do you wish to proceed with your counterclaims? Yes, Your Honor. I'm seeking damages for trespass, reimbursement of legal fees, and a permanent restraining order preventing Miss Whitfield and any member of the Willowbrook Estates HOA from entering my property. Karen shot to her feet. You can't do this. I'm the HOA president. I have authority. Judge Morrison's gavel cracked down like thunder. Miss Whitfield, you will remain seated and silent, or I will hold you in contempt. The courtroom went still again. The judge turned back to me. Mr. Mitchell, your evidence is thorough and credible. I'm inclined to grant summary judgment in your favor on all counts. Cooper made one last desperate plea. "Your Honor, we request a continuance to gather additional evidence." "Denied," the judge said firmly. "I've seen more than enough." Over the next 20 minutes, Judge Morrison methodically dismantled every one of Karen's claims. One by one, she cited the lack of proof, the fabricated arguments, and the harassment documented in my exhibits. By the time she finished, the ruling was devastating for Karen. All her claims were dismissed with prejudice, meaning she could never bring them back. The judge also granted my entire countersuit. Karen Whitfield was ordered to pay $15,000 in damages for trespass, plus my legal fees, which I generously calculated at only $5,000, though it could have been much higher, and a permanent restraining order requiring her to stay at least 500 feet away from my property. But Judge Morrison wasn't finished. "Miss Whitfield," she said sternly, "your behavior in this case has been appalling. You've abused your position, harassed a law-abiding property owner, and wasted this court's time with frivolous litigation." Then she turned to Cooper. "Counselor, I strongly suggest you revisit the State Bar's rules on due diligence before filing any future lawsuits. Consider this your warning." And then came the knockout blow. "I'm also forwarding this case to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal trespass charges," Judge Morrison announced. "And I'll be sending a copy of this ruling to the Willowbrook Estates HOA board with a strong recommendation they review their leadership." Karen's face crumpled. "I was only trying to help the community," she wailed. "No, Miss Whitfield," the judge said coldly. "You were trying to bully someone into giving you what you wanted. There's a difference." When the gavel fell, it was over. As we left the courtroom, Karen was instantly surrounded by angry HOA board members who'd been watching from the gallery. I caught snippets of furious whispers, talks of emergency meetings, resignations, and votes of no confidence. Cooper slunk away without so much as a glance in her direction. 3 days later, a certified letter arrived in my mailbox. The Willowbrook Estates HOA had voted unanimously to remove Karen Whitfield from her position and permanently ban her from holding any leadership role within their organization. The district attorney moved forward with the trespassing case. 2 months later, Karen pleaded guilty to misdemeanor trespass, earning herself 12 months probation and 500 hours of community service, specifically barred from any HOA involvement. But the best part came 6 months after that. The state law school invited me to be the keynote speaker for their continuing education series on property law and civil litigation. My topic, "When Karens Attack, a Case Study in HOA Overreach." I used our entire case as the centerpiece, complete with security footage and official court transcripts. The lecture went viral across legal education websites. Karen's legacy wasn't the connected trail system she dreamed of. It was as a cautionary tale taught to every new law student about the perils of abusing authority and underestimating your opponent. Word eventually reached me that she'd sold her Willowbrook Estates home at a heavy loss and moved out of state. The new HOA board sent me a formal apology letter and, amusingly, a fruit basket. As for the $20,000 in damages and fees she paid me, I donated every penny to a legal aid foundation that helps homeowners fight abusive HOAs. They named their new conference room the Whitfield Warning Room. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Last I heard, Karen was working as a receptionist at a small real estate office 3 states away. Her dreams of HOA power buried beneath the weight of a restraining order, a criminal record, and the kind of legal defeat that echoes forever.